Hello everyone, I'm Figuristic Productions, and today I'm going to be showing off my custom Mcfarlane Murder Machine. But before we start, I'd just like to say that if you enjoyed this video at any time, consider hitting the like button and also subscribing. But with that said, let's jump right into it. Starting off with articulation, Murder Machine has 360-degree head rotation. And I have modded his neck joint quite a bit, so he is now able to look this high up, this far down, and he still has very good head tilt. Moving on to his arms, Murder Machine's arms allow him to go all the way up, even past a little bit, because his shoulder pieces are softer plastic and allow for more flexibility. In turn, he's also able to turn his arm 360 degrees as well, due to the softness of the arm pads. He also has bicep swivel on both arms. His arms are also double jointed and go way past 90 degrees. A very good double joint elbow, if you ask me. Moving on to his hands are on Mcfarlane ball wrists that allow for vertical hinge and also horizontal hinge. Moving on to his chest, Murder Machine has 360-degree chest rotation, and he's able to bend this far forward with the bottom torso piece, diaphragm piece, and back this far. I will note that it is possible due to the modifications I've made that he's able to bend back this far, but I will also note that even beforehand modding him, he was actually able to bend back a lot, but forward is much more than it was before, as before he didn't lean forward much. But moving on to his legs, Murder Machine's able to kick about this high up and about this far back. He has a little bit of thigh twist, but not very much due to the design of Mcfarlane legs. And also, he has double jointed knees that go about this far, but don't kick his butt. His feet are on old Mcfarlane ball hinges that allow for 360-degree rotation of the foot. Also allow for the foot to be hinged in different areas, depending on the placement of the ball. And still allow for the foot to go up this high and only this far down. And also his feet still have articulation on their toes. I will also note that this figure also has ports on the bottom of his feet, which also allowed for his Mcfarlane stand and also for other energy blasts, as you may have seen in the intro, to be put on him as well. When it comes to accessories, Murder Machine comes with the standard DC multiverse stand and also comes with this extra accessory that can be swapped out for one of his hands, which is almost like a tendril or a tentacle-like mechanical attachment. But in addition to that, he also has his standard DC multiverse trading card as well. This is the front of it. And this is the back. Pause now if you want to read the description. Continuing with accessories, I want to show off these blast effects or even boot effects that I use from a Marvel Legends Iron Man. Several of them, in fact. They can be applied to Murder Machine and look very well on him. As you see here, I've already ported one effect into one of Murder Machine's legs or feet, and you can see right here that pops in almost perfectly actually. And they stay on very sturdily. And I also want to note the fact that I also have the stand right here that's from a Mcfarlane Batman Beyond. However, the stand is sort of weak in the fact that when there's a lot of weight, it will bring a figure, whatever figures that's holding, down. So you kind of have to bend it back like this a little bit and kind of hook it at kind of an angle. I usually try to do it around Murder Machine's hips, since his stomach is kind of an area that's weird because it does cause the effects to stand on here, and it kind of warps them a little bit. So what I try to do is take it by its hip about right here and try to just lift it up a bit. And as you can see right here, it's not standing right now, but I do try to do it similar to this. And I try to balance it out, moving his feet, crunching them a little bit, just so it kind of seems like he is flying more, because it is slightly difficult to get him up all the way. As you can see right here, I'm still using the effects to stand it, but it's the best you can do in certain situations. And now showing off the blue effect, you can see that the effect actually looks really good. However, I will note that it doesn't actually pour into his hand. as I've used, I believe it's non-air drying clay that is sticky, and I put it on his hand. As you can see right there, I put it right on about the port, so it kind of matches up with it. But I will say that it actually looks really good on Murder Machine. It actually looks like a blast effect that's coming from his repulsor. Also, another thing I want to note is that these effects right here can actually port perfectly fine in here as well. It's the same design as the orange ones, so if you wanted to, you can either have the blue one or just the orange one, or you can mismatch it like this and kind of have a weird Murder Machine. But I would say that the blue is probably better for his repulsors, while the orange ones are much better for his legs and being his, I guess you could say, jet boosters. And lastly, I want to show off this accessory, which I completely forgot about that I had made. It's a custom spine and head that I had made for originally my Predators, because I own a few Predator figures, but I don't yet have a bloody spine piece that they can hold. And I just remembered that in Murder Machine's backstory, he actually ripped out the spine and head of Cyborg. And while this doesn't exactly look like it would be meant for Cyborg, I think this is a really cool addition to have to him. You can see there that I painted it a really vibrant red to make it look like it's a very flesh wound or trophy, I guess you could say. And also, you can see that I'm still using the non-drying air clay in order to stick it onto his Murder Machine's hand. Now, going into details, I want to start off with the spine that I've made. And like I've said before, I actually made this from a plastic skeleton that was around 6-inch figure size, roughly, that I had gotten for a Halloween decoration. And as you can see here, I painted it a very vibrant red. I painted it red in a lot of areas, making it completely red, but I did add a little splotches of some light red. As you can see here, I added some light red in certain areas just to give like a little bit distinction between the spine and the head, just so that way it looks a little bit different in certain areas. As you can see, certain areas look a little bit patchier than others, and that was my intention when I was going for it. I also added a slight black wash, I believe, to it, or at least a darker brush mark to it, just to make it look even more bloody and more, I guess, gory, as you would say. I also painted the eyes and also the little bit on the sides of the mouth and also the nose here black to give it that sunken feeling, like there's nothing left after the spine has been ripped out. The eyes are gone, the nose, as most of the stuff is actually taken off already when ideally when a predator takes off a skull. So I just decided to replicate that. And I think it's a really good addition to this figure, actually. But moving on to the details of the main figure, I want to point out that for Murder Machine, I was inspired by this image here, slightly, by the comic art. As you can see here on the comic art, he has silver around his arms right there, and also part of his legs, but the rest of him is kind of a gray. And honestly, I thought it was okay. It was initially a design I was actually going for. But then, on YouTube, I searched up Murder Machine, and I actually came across the XM Studios Murder Machine statue, which actually has a very similar look to this I based off of. As you can see here, there's a lot of silver instead of the reference image, where there's actually more of a gray around his body. As just like the statue, there's a lot of silver, and as you can see here, it covers more of his body. I also think that this works more because this is essentially supposed to be a cyborg Batman, the character cyborg Batman, or Cyborg and Batman. But I do think that this fits much more, as Cyborg himself has a lot of silver around his entire body. And I think that this version, even though it looks a lot more like Cyborg, I think just looks better for the overall character. But continuing on with details, this symbol here, and also these rings around his shoulder pads here, used to actually be completely orange. As well as his eyes. His eyes used to be like a somewhat vibrant, bright orange, and I never thought it looked right. Like with the darker aesthetic of this Batman, the darker coloring that he initially came in, because initially he wasn't even accurate to the source material here with the silver on his arms, as he came in this really like kind of drab gray a little bit. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell, but you can see here, if you look close enough, you can actually see that I actually didn't paint these areas here. As you can see, this area right here is more of like a gunmetal gray, while this area is a much duller gray and more, I would call it a dead gray. And this figure came the entire time and all over the place as more of a dead gray. And it really took away from the figure, because this figure, in my opinion, has really good sculpt. Like you can see here on his neck right here, in all that dark gray, it was really hard to see all the detail. But even though it is covered in silver now, you can kind of see it a lot more when the light is shining on it, showing that there's some sculpt in between of it. But going back to the lights, I painted this right here completely red for the bat symbol because I thought it just looks a little bit better. As you see here, some of the paint kind of chipped off. You can kind of see some orange. And on the shoulders here, you can see that I painted everything. I painted the red in between, and I even painted the silver on the rings as well, the in-betweens. But I want to quickly talk about his face, though. So for Murder Machine's face, I did color the eyes red, and I colored the entire head silver, but you can see there's some red markings here. And this mouthpiece right here, while it does seem very similar to this gunmetal gray that I'd put on this figure, this was actually also originally part of the figure, which looked cool, and I thought that I would like to keep it. So that's the main reason I kept it. But it just kind of adds to more of that where I was kind of like it blended in too much. The dark gray of this with this also dark gray, but a little bit more of like a brighter metallic gray, just blend in so much that so much detail was lost. But moving on to the arms, you can see that. Oh, in addition, I also left the blue in between here, as I actually really like the blue that Mcfarlane added on this figure. As you can see here, some areas are slightly covered up with silver. As you can see here, it's mostly blue, but there's some silver in between. Although these areas over here were completely dark before, so I just decided to just paint them over. Made it a little bit easier on myself. But I have decided that I might go back and repaint this guy just a little bit, maybe adding a couple coats and possibly even adding in more of those lights. But I do like how it looks now. And as you can see here, in order to avoid paint rub, I would also like to mention that this is actually one of my very first customs I also made too. And while it wasn't the first like Deathstroke, it was very early in my customizing career, I guess you would say. So I was kind of trying to avoid like paint rub and stuff, and I did sort of avoid it. But the main reason I did this was by not painting the ball hinges here. As you can see, I didn't even do that for the feet as well. And honestly, I mainly did it to avoid paint rub. But looking at it now, I actually think it looks really good. It actually just looks like a legitimate robot or like a suit that Batman has with different segments colored different things. I also did this for the arm joints as well too. So as you can see here, it almost looks like a rivet in there where it's a gray rivet while the metal surrounding it is different colors like the silver and also like the very shiny copper that I had also put on here. And even moving on to the back, you can also see that I still continued with the overall theme of keeping the blue on these parts right here while painting the silver. And you can even see that for his spine, I was also inspired by the XM Studios figure statue by this. As you can see here that his spine originally was all gray, but now it has a copper coating on it. And you can kind of see that there is a little bit of paint rub on here, which I might have to go back and repaint. But I still think that it looks really good. Again, a lot of it was lost in detail because it was all gray. And it might be hard to see here. I think in better lighting you can see it, but you can see that I actually painted more the back here, more of a gunmetal gray, while the rest of this is much brighter silver to add more contrast. And same thing is here as well. I went over it with kind of like a gunmetal gray, but I put silver over the main areas that look more like servos, just to give it some distinction. As well as I also did that for more the plating on his butt and his lower back here, as well as you can see on the sides, and also his ribs on the side as well too. I've also put some copper paint on there, just so that way it looks more distinctive, and it just adds a lot of separation in between that I think makes the figure look even better than it already did originally. And like I said before, it actually helps bring out the sculpt. Originally, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even know this was here. Like the panels right here that continue down to about like the lower, I guess, pelvic area, as you would say, because so much of it was a dark gray, so it was almost impossible to see. And also, I believe that I even painted, yes, I did. I painted even all the way down here as well, just to avoid kind of that, I guess, that paint mishap. So that way there was a sense of consistency. And you can even see here, after I've kind of modified this and he's able to go back much more, you can even see that he even has panels up here as well, which I also painted because I wanted to keep a sense of consistency with it. But this figure has a lot of sculpt, but it was sadly lost due to the amount of gray paint or sculpting that was on this figure. But you can see that when it got to the legs, I did kind of keep this inspiration right here on the legs, as I kept this part right here a gray while I made the rest of this here a silver. And as you can see here, I painted all around his legs, made it much more different. There's less copper here, and I think I actually like it a little bit better, making it look like the legs are actually much more fortified and they're a lot stronger. They're specifically made to take a lot more damage than his arms. But who knows? Maybe I'll go back and slightly add some bronze, maybe just to add a little bit more color to the legs. But as of now, I actually like it how it is. And it might be hard to tell here too, but on his knees and also his lower calf area here, or top calf area, I actually added the gunmetal gray onto it because I just thought that it would look a lot better than just leaving it gray. As you see here, it blends in pretty easily, as you can't really tell from the inside of here to the outside. But I think it looks really good actually. And it actually helps to kind of add more distinction between Murder Machine. And it's the same for the feet as well. I painted them in silver, and also I painted the bottom as well. I will also note that I did get a brighter silver paint to paint all the silver on him. However, I'm not sure if it was because I hadn't mixed it correctly, but the paint, as you can see here, looks slightly odd sometimes because apparently I had to do several coatings for this. I had to do, if I remember correctly, almost 3 to 4 coatings for it, and even then, it still looks sort of weak at certain areas of the paint. As you can see here, this area kind of chipped off too. I'm not sure if this was a result of either maybe the figure falling a couple times, or perhaps maybe it was because this pad was here, or maybe it was because the paint wasn't as strong and maybe it rubbed off or just chipped off a little bit. But you can see that it does look slightly odd at certain areas. But I will say that I still love this though. I actually love the way it looks and it shines back very nice, which I really do like. Oh, and before I forget, I'll quickly show off his hands here. You can even see that I went to the effort of actually coloring his hands as well. As you can see here, if the camera will focus, as you can see here, I painted Murder Machine's fingers all silver, and I left just enough so that way the repulsor could still be seen with the gray and the blue. I also did the same for this gripping hand as well. It might be hard to see, but I basically did the same thing. Another thing I want to note too is that eventually I do want to go back and kind of do a version 2 of this guy. I really like how he looks, but I think there's a lot of things that I could do to make it just a little bit better from what I've done before. I think I've come a long way since customizing, and I think it's a good way to customize it and kind of update this figure. And before I forget, let's take a quick look at the sculpt for the accessory. Oops. Well, now that I can actually hold it, you can actually see that it has a very squid and octopus-like design to it. As you can see here, it almost looks like suction cups on the tendrils as well. However, interestingly enough, it's mainly on this tendril and this one here. The other three that have, I guess you could say, spikes at the end of them, don't actually have this design with the suction cups. And they're more sectioned off, and they have kind of like these weird boils that are on top of it. But going on the more top texture, you can see that there's a lot of sculpt here. You can see that the points are kind of sculpted with this barb-like texture, and you can see that some of this mechanic machinery here, this like kind of, how would you say, like a carbon steel almost. They have these, I still don't understand this part though, like the weird boils on top of everything. And my favorite part of this probably is the fact that you can actually see, and it's actually sculpted, the indentations between each area of the almost like joints, I guess you could say. As you can see here, there's a cut right there, a cut right there, cut right there. And also what I definitely love is that every couple of the joints and segments have something different for sculpting. As you can see here, it's kind of rigid, while this one has a square, this one is smooth, but it has some boils on it, and this one has the carbon fiber texture. And now here's a quick look at Murder Machine with his tentacle hand. I will note that for accessories, I wish Mcfarlane had actually included a secondary tentacle, or maybe a blaster or a blade, or just something to kind of switch out Murder Machine's hands, as well as also alternate hands. As you can see before, and I'll show right here, he has like this trigger hand right here, which is more of like a closed hand or gripping hand, I guess you could say. But on this other side, he has an open hand, and it's kind of weird because depending on what way you're, I guess, stylizing or setting Murder Machine up for pictures, you might not be able to do it a certain way. But yeah, that's my Mcfarlane Murder Machine custom. If you made it this far into the video, thank you. Thank you for watching. And if you want to, consider hitting the like button and also the subscribe button for more action figure content. But with that said, I've been Figuristic Productions. I'll see you all on the next one. Peace.